Hi friends. Please subscribe and help me get my first 1,000 subscribers. It's one click for you, but for me it's a huge encouragement and motivation. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. I hope you enjoy this story. Let us go. 8 years of marriage. On paper it sounded substantial, but for Claire, it felt like an eternity spent running on a treadmill, lots of effort, zero change of scenery. They lived in a pristine gated community in Orange County, California, where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives and the silence was heavy enough to weigh by the pound. Mornings meant identical protein smoothies, days were spent grinding at work, evenings involved fighting traffic on the 405 only to collapse in front of the same Netflix series they'd been watching for months. Robert viewed this existence as the American dream realized. To him, stability was not boring, it was a sign of strength, a fortress he had built against chaos. But for Claire, that fortress was slowly morphing into a prison cell. She needed to break out, even if just for a day. She had always been the firecracker in the room. Her college friends used to say, "Claire, you like a Energizer bunny, you see not sit still." And it was true, her laugh was infectious, loud and uninhibited. She craved adventure, dopamine hits, experiments. Robert was her polar opposite, stoic, pragmatic, a man who believed a husband's job was to be the anchor. To him, deviating from the spreadsheet of their life felt like an unnecessary risk. It happened on a Tuesday evening. They were sitting on the back patio, the hum of the pool filter the only sound in the humid air. Claire was nursing a glass of chilled Chardonnay, her eyes playful, but beneath the shimmer, there was a steeliness Robert had not noticed before. "Rob," she started, keeping her tone light, almost teasing. "Have you ever noticed that our life has become a bit Groundhog Day? Work, home, dinner, repeat. Do not you ever get bored?" Robert set his iPhone down on the patio table and looked at her, genuinely confused. "Bored? I'd call it stability, Claire. We have a great life. The house, the cars. We have everything. What else could you possibly need?" She smirked, taking a slow sip of wine and swinging her leg off the edge of the lounger. "I need a pulse, Robert. You know? A little spark. We've been together 8 years, and everything runs on a schedule like a train line. I do not want us to turn into one of those zombie couples at the country club who stay together just because it's convenient." Robert frowned. He hated these hypothetical spiral conversations. "What are you trying to say? That I am not enough for you?" "No," she said quickly, reaching out to cover his hand with hers. Her smile was warm, perhaps a little too rehearsed. "I just miss the rush. I was talking to a girlfriend from yoga class recently. She told me about these lifestyle mixers. Parties for couples. People dance, play games, loosen up, have a few cocktails. It's not a club, it's not some seedy hookup spot, it's just adult entertainment. A new way to socialize." Robert pulled his hand back, shaking his head. "Mixers? For couples? Are you serious? I do not know anyone in that scene. What would we even do there? Watch a bunch of strangers get wasted and act like idiots?" Claire feigned a pout, but her eyes were sharp. "God, you overthink everything. They just normal people, Rob. Professionals like us. They just know how to let their hair down. You know I'd never put you in a bad spot. We've been a team for this long. Let us just try it. Once. It will not change who we are, if anything, it'll wake us up." His brow furrowed deeper. "I do not trust that kind of stuff. It sounds sketchy. Greasy. Sketchy?" She laughed, a bright, disarming sound. "It's dancing and stupid party games. It's infinitely more fun than sitting here watching HBO until we fall asleep on the couch. Or do you actually want me to die of boredom right here in this patio chair?" There was a challenge in her voice, and Robert heard it loud and clear. He could put his foot down, he could shut this down right now. But a gnawing thought took root in the back of his mind. If I forbid it, she'll find a way to go anyway. He knew her stubborn streak all too well. "No, Claire," he said firmly. "I do not want to go." She set her wine glass down with a sharp clink and stared right at him. "Do you not trust me?" The words hit harder than he expected. Her tone was a masterclass in guilt tripping. Robert paused. He knew the trust card was her ace in the hole. "I trust you," he finally said, his voice measured. "But that does not mean I have to sign off on every crazy idea you have." She smiled then, the smile of someone who just won the negotiation. She leaned in, trailing her fingers along his shoulder, her voice dropping to a persuasive whisper. "Then prove it. Let us go just one time. If you hate it, we bail, and we never speak of it again." Robert looked into her eyes, an internal war raging behind his own. The whole concept made his skin crawl. But he saw the excitement in her face, the hunger for something different, and he realized that refusing might cause a fissure in their marriage that he could not patch up. "One time," he said coldly. "That's it." She immediately wrapped her arms around him, laughing and pressing herself against him with a passion he had not felt in months. In that moment, Robert felt a strange, sinking sensation. It felt less like he was being thanked for his trust, and more like he had just been thanked for stepping into a trap he had not yet identified. He tossed and turned that night. Claire, on the other hand, slept soundly, a faint smile on her lips. Robert stared at the ceiling fan cutting through the darkness and thought, where is this actually going? He did not know it yet, but he had just bought a ticket to a game where the stakes were infinitely higher than he could afford. Saturday evening kicked off as if they were heading to a standard dinner party in the hills, not some experimental social mixer. Claire was buzzing with energy, blasting top 40 hits in the car, singing along and laughing like it was her birthday. Robert sat behind the wheel of his Tesla, gripping the leather tighter than necessary, driving in silence. He could not shake the feeling that he was being dragged to his own execution. The house was located in Coto de Casa, one of those ultra-exclusive neighborhoods behind double gates where privacy was the ultimate currency. The driveway was already packed with Range Rovers, Porsches, and G-Wagons. Music and laughter drifted from the massive backyard terrace. Claire adjusted her cocktail dress, shorter than what she usually wore, shot him a quick glance, and said, "Just relax, okay? It's totally normal. Smile like you actually want to be here." Robert did not reply. He parked and followed her up the stone path. Inside, the vibe was surprisingly upscale. High-top tables were scattered around the living room, a bartender was mixing drinks near the kitchen island, and a smooth jazz house remix played over the Sonos system. People were chatting, laughing, greeting each other with hugs. Robert noted that most of the guests were couples in their 30s and 40s. It looked respectable. Someone was complaining about interest rates, another couple was sharing a story about their kid's private school tuition, someone else laughed at a dad joke. The first impression was deceptively calm. A couple approached them, a tall, broad-shouldered man and a fit, attractive brunette. The man extended a hand. "I'm Jake. And this is my wife, Vanessa. Good to meet you guys." Claire beamed, her smile a little too wide, as if greeting long-lost friends. Her laugh rang out, clear and unburdened. Robert shook Jake's hand and felt a grip that was firm, bordering on aggressive, the handshake of a guy who sells high-end real estate or runs a startup. Vanessa smiled softly, but her eyes swept over Claire with a look of recognition, as if they had already sized each other up. "So, how are you guys liking it?" Jake asked. "First time is always a little nerve-wracking. But seriously, relax. It's all just for fun. We're still getting the lay of the land," Robert replied dryly. "Oh, do not worry about it. The vibe here is super friendly. We all like one big family," Vanessa added, raising her glass in a toast. Claire was already laughing along with them, slipping seamlessly into the rhythm of the night. She chatted animatedly, her eyes sparkling, her hand casually brushing Vanessa's arm to emphasize a point. Robert watched the interaction, a heavy stone of suspicion settling in his stomach. 30 minutes later, the dynamic shifted. The crowd began to fragment. Some stayed by the bar, while others migrated to a sunken living area where a large plush rug dominated the space. Someone was breaking out cards and chips. The atmosphere loosened up significantly. "Come on, let us play," Claire said, tugging on his hand. They walked over to the rug. The MC for the night, a young guy in a designer shirt, clapped his hands. "All right, everyone. First game is an icebreaker. Couples trivia. You answer honestly, or you take a shot. No exceptions." The cards circulated. The questions started off cheeky but quickly veered into invasive territory. Who spends the most on unnecessary crap? When was the last time you hooked up in the kitchen? Who said I love you first? People laughed, downed shots, and teased each other. Claire answered with a daring confidence, her responses drawing cheers and laughter from the group. Robert forced a smile, but stayed silent whenever a question crossed his personal line. Then, Claire drew a card and read it aloud. Who in this room is the most attractive man here, other than your husband? The room erupted in whistles and catcalls. Robert started to reach for the card to toss it away, but Claire, scanning the room, let a slow, deliberate smile spread across her face. Her gaze landed on Jake and lingered there for a beat too long. In that split second, Robert realized this was not just casual flirting. There was history in that look. His blood ran cold. Claire quickly pivoted, laughing, I'm kidding. Obviously, my husband is the best. Laughter diffused the tension, but Robert could not unsee the look she had given Jake. The game went on, but he noticed her laughing just a little too hard at Jake's jokes. When the group moved to the dance floor, Jake ended up next to them. His hands were a little too comfortable in the space around her, his smile a little too predatory. And Vanessa? She did not seem to mind. She watched the scene with the calm detachment of someone following a script. Robert's body went rigid. The music thumped, people were grinding and laughing, maintaining the veneer of a wild party, but he saw the crack in the picture. The same crack Claire had mentioned back home. She had wanted fire, and now that fire was burning right next to her, but he was not the one holding the match. By midnight, the inhibitions in the room had evaporated. Couples were disappearing onto the terrace or slipping into side rooms. The MC gathered everyone back in the main living area. All right, folks, time for the real game. He brought out a large decorative glass bowl and placed it on the coffee table. Inside, a pile of car keys jingled. Rules are simple. Gentlemen, drop your keys in the bowl. Ladies, you pick blindly. Then we find out who's getting a ride home with who. Do not take it too seriously. It's just a tradition, a way to mix things up. A murmur of excitement went through the crowd. Someone chuckled, someone else poured more wine. Vanessa was the first to step up, tossing Jake's keys in with a quick, knowing glance at her husband. Claire took Robert's keys from his hand and dropped them into the pile. The glass clinked sharply. Robert felt every muscle in his body tense up. He realized with sudden, absolute clarity, this night was not going to end with just jokes. The living room was buzzing with a chaotic energy. Conversations overlapped, laughter grew louder and more raucous, and side bets were already being placed on who would end up with whom. The music had been dialed down to a low thrum, just enough to fill the silence without drowning out the MC's voice. The crystal bowl sat in the center of the coffee table, its faceted edges catching the light from the chandelier, glimmering like an ominous centerpiece for the main event everyone had been waiting for. Robert stood next to Claire, feeling a tightness in his chest that grew heavier with every passing second. He could not believe this was just a joke. It was too elaborate, too weird for a standard social gathering. Yet everyone around them acted as if this was standard operating procedure for a Saturday night. Someone was already ribbing their neighbor, another man had his arm around his wife's waist, whispering something that made her giggle nervously. All right ladies, shall we? The MC picked up the bowl and gave it a little shake, the metal keys jangling against the glass like coins in a slot machine. First up, Vanessa. Jake's wife stepped forward, reached in, and pulled out a set of keys. She threw her head back and laughed. Well, this is interesting, she said, locking eyes with her husband. Looks like I am not sleeping in my own bed tonight. The crowd hooted, someone cracked a joke about upgrades, and the game rolled on. One by one, the women stepped up, fished around in the bowl, feigned shock or delight, and went to hug the men whose keys they'd drawn. Robert tried to keep his face neutral, a mask of polite detachment, but his hands were balled into fists inside his pockets. Then it was Claire's turn. She walked toward the table with that same playful sway Robert knew all too well. Her eyes were bright, her step light and bouncy, as if she had been anticipating this exact moment all night. She dipped her hand into the bowl, swirled the keys around with a dramatic flair, and pulled one set out. The MC leaned in, milking the suspense. And Claire is paired with Jake. The room exploded in applause, whistles, and cheers. What are the odds? Someone shouted. Lucky man Jake, another voice added. People clapped like they were witnessing a game show finale. Robert felt his heart seize. His gaze snapped to Clare, searching for a sign of hesitation. He found none. She did not look embarrassed. She did not try to laugh it off as an awkward coincidence. Instead, her eyes lit up with a genuine thrill. Her lips curled into a smile, and she locked eyes with Jake. The look that passed between them was heavy, loaded with a familiarity that made Robert's stomach turn. Robert stepped forward, breaking his perimeter. "Enough," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the laughter. "We leaving." The laughter died down, but only for a second. Clare grabbed his arm, squeezing it, trying to smooth over the tension with a bright, fake smile. "Honey, do not be dramatic. It's just a game. We just going to go for a ride, hang out for a bit. You know I love you." Robert yanked his arm away. "Nobody is going anywhere." But the crowd turned on him. The mood shifted from celebratory to pressuring. People nudged Jake, someone heckled, "Do not be a buzzkill, man, let her have some fun." The atmosphere felt suffocating, closing in on him. He saw Clare looking at him with that specific expression, the one that meant, "Play along, or you re-embarrassing me." "Robert, please," she said softly, her voice dropping to a coaxing purr. "You promised you'd trust me." "Trust?" His voice was ice cold. "I see the way you re-looking at him. That is not trust, Clare. That's humiliation. I am not doing this." She leaned in close, whispering so only he could hear, her breath hot against his ear. "You being too uptight. Just trust me. I'll come back. Everything will be fine." And without waiting for his response, she turned her back on him and faced Jake. He was standing there with that same arrogant, self-assured grin. One look was all Robert needed to know. That man already considered Clare his property for the night. "Clare." Robert barked. "We are leaving. Now." She glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Stop acting like a child, Robert. We just want to hang out and talk." The words hit him harder than a physical blow. He felt a scorching heat rise in his chest, but he kept his hands clenched at his sides. Clare gave him one last dismissive look and walked toward the front door with Jake. Her dress swayed as she adjusted her purse strap, and Robert realized with sickening clarity that she was doing this entirely of her own free will. The crowd started buzzing again. "Relax, dude, it's just a game," someone muttered passing by. But for Robert, the game was over. This was betrayal, pure and simple. He watched the heavy oak door close behind them, and a cold, steely resolve settled over him. Robert walked out a few minutes later, got into his Tesla, and turned on the headlights. He watched as Jake's Range Rover pulled out of the driveway. Clare was in the passenger seat, her silhouette illuminated by the dashboard lights. She looked relaxed. She did not even look back. He started the engine and followed. He did not know what he was going to do yet, but he knew one thing for certain: this night was not going to end the way she planned. Robert tailed them from a distance, careful not to get too close. The taillights of the Range Rover dipped around the winding curves of the canyon roads, disappearing and reappearing in the darkness. Clare was sitting right next to Jake, her head resting back against the seat. She never turned around once, as if she had completely erased the existence of the husband she had just abandoned at a party. For Robert, every second of that drive was torture. He was white-knuckling the steering wheel so hard the leather groaned under his grip, the veins in his forearms bulging. They turned into a quiet, upscale residential neighborhood, Mission Viejo, perhaps, or Ladera Ranch. Jake pulled the SUV into the driveway of an immaculate two-story home with a perfectly manicured lawn. Robert killed his lights and coasted to a stop a few houses down, blending into the shadows. He watched as Clare and Jake got out. She was laughing, her dress fluttering in the night breeze, adjusting it with a calmness that was terrifying for a woman who had just left her husband. Jake unlocked the front door, gestured for her to enter, and they vanished inside. Robert sat alone in the dark. His heart was thumping a dull, heavy rhythm against his ribs. His thoughts were a tangled mess. He tried to tell himself that nothing had happened yet. Maybe they were just talking, sitting in the living room, having a nightcap. But his gut screamed otherwise. He had seen the looks, heard the laugh. Too much evidence pointed to the fact that Clare knew exactly what she was signing up for. The minutes dragged on like hours. 10 minutes. 15. Robert sat huddled in the driver's seat, paralyzed by indecision. Part of him wanted to start the car and drive away, leave it all behind, pretend he did not care. But something primal stopped him. A man does not leave his wife in a stranger's house, and he does not close his eyes to betrayal. Suddenly, just as he was about to make a move, a black sedan, a Lyft or Uber, pulled up to the curb right in front of Jake's house. The back door opened, and Vanessa stepped out. At the party, she had drawn another man's keys, yet here she was, calmly checking her phone and smoothing her hair. Robert recognized her instantly, and a chill ran down his spine. She was supposed to be somewhere else, with someone else. Vanessa opened the front gate, walked confidently up the path, and fished a key out of her clutch. She unlocked the front door as if it were the most natural thing in the world, because it was. This was her house. She slipped inside, and the door clicked shut softly behind her. Robert sat frozen, his mind racing to catch up. The picture was coming into focus, and it was uglier than he imagined. It was not a game. It was not random. It was a setup. Claire knew whose house she was going to. She had not ended up here by mistake. He remembered her easy laughter, the just entertainment speech. It was all a lie. He could not stay in the car any longer. Waiting for the right moment, he got out, closing his door quietly so it would not slam. He walked slowly toward the house, his footsteps heavy but determined. He stopped at the front door and listened. At first, silence. Just the hum of the central AC and the faint murmur of a TV somewhere on the ground floor. He tried the handle. It turned. Unlocked. Robert pushed the door open and slipped inside, closing it gently behind him. The house was dimly lit, a single lamp glowing in the foyer. On a side table, there were wine glasses, an open bottle of Pinot, a plate of appetizers. He moved toward the stairs, climbing slowly, every step echoing in his chest like a war drum. On the second floor, a door at the end of the hallway was ajar. Soft, golden light spilled out across the plush carpet, accompanied by muffled sounds. Robert stopped, took a shaky breath, and crept closer. From the hallway he heard laughter, a woman's laugh, light and breathless, mingling with a low male chuckle. It was Clare. The same laugh he used to love, now warped into something that sliced through him like a razor. He pushed the door open just a few inches more, and the scene before him burned itself into his retinas. Clare was on the bed, her hair a mess, her dress discarded on the floor, leaving her exposed. She did not look shy. She did not look confused. She looked entirely in her element, playful, eager, willing. Vanessa was sitting right next to her, her hand sliding confidently along Clare's thigh. Both women were giggling, sharing some private, intimate joke. Their proximity was effortless, as if they had done this a dozen times before. There was a spark in their eyes, a shared knowledge that went far deeper than a single night's acquaintance. Jake stood slightly to the side, watching them with a look of smug anticipation. A second later, he joined them on the bed. His hand settled on Clare's shoulders, and she leaned back into his touch instantly, as if she had been waiting for it. Robert watched as Clare's lips met Vanessa's, saw how her body arched in response to Jake's movements. The scene was filled with an easy fluidity, whispers, touch, laughter. There was no shame here, no hesitation. It looked choreographed. For Robert, the last defenses crumbled. This was not a mistake. It was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a lifestyle. She was a part of this, woven into their world where everything was permissible. And the most terrifying part was that Clare looked happy. Her smile, her engagement, her hunger, it all screamed that this was exactly where she wanted to be. Robert stood in the shadows of the hallway, a cold, blinding rage washing over him. There were no more illusions. 8 years of marriage had just been incinerated by that laughter, those touches, and a betrayal she had not even bothered to hide. A split second later, Robert snapped. He kicked the door open so hard the handle punched a hole in the drywall. The room plunged into a deathly silence. Robert stood in the doorway, his shoulders rigid, his glare heavy and unblinking, carved from granite. Clare scrambled back against the headboard, the sheet barely covering her, her face twisting into a mask of sheer panic. Vanessa clutched a duvet to her chest, while Jake slowly rose from the edge of the bed, hands raised in a placating gesture, as if he were about to negotiate a business deal. "Whoa, buddy, let us just calm down," Jake started, but he never finished the sentence. Robert crossed the room in 2 strides and drove his fist into Jake's face. It was a clean, brutal connection. Jake crumpled to the floor, knocking a wine glass off the nightstand. The crystal shattered, sending shards skittering across the hardwood. Both women screamed in unison, a piercing sound that sliced through the tension. "Robert, stop!" Claire shrieked, lunging toward him. "You do not understand. It is not what you think." But Robert already had Jake by the collar of his dress shirt, hauling him up like a rag doll. "Not what I think." Robert snarled, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "How exactly am I supposed to interpret this, Claire? It does not mean anything. It is just fun. It is just entertainment." She stammered, terror written all over her face. "How long?" His voice dropped to a low, menacing growl. "How long have you known them?" Jake stayed silent, struggling to loosen Robert's grip, blood trickling from his split lip. Robert slammed him back against the wall, shaking the framed art. "Answer me," he roared. Vanessa let out a stifled sob but stayed mute. Claire buried her face in her hands and started to cry, but her tears did not even register on Robert's radar. He stepped closer to her, his eyes drilling into her soul. "I felt it. Back at the party. You two looked at each other like you had history. Was I right?" His voice was quieter now, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "Tell me the truth. Now." Claire froze. For a few agonizing seconds, she fished for a lie, but then she crumbled, letting out a jagged sob. "Okay. I'll tell you. Just do not hit him again, please." Robert did not speak, but his expression did not soften an inch. "I found them a while ago," the words dragged out of her throat, painful and raspy. "A few months ago. On a site. A lifestyle community where couples look for connections. I just wanted to see what it was about. We messaged for a bit. Then I met them for coffee. A few times." Her shoulders shook, but she kept talking, realizing that the dam had broken. "It was not anything serious, Rob. It was just a diversion. I thought I could keep it compartmentalized. You know I love you. This is all just a game. A physical release." She took a tentative step toward him, her voice turning into a plea. "Robert, listen to me. I never wanted to hurt our marriage. It is like going to Vegas, you know? I took a risk, I got a rush. But you are always my priority. You re my husband. None of this matters." He looked at her as if she were speaking an alien language. "Does not matter?" he repeated hollowly. "You recalling 8 years of marriage unimportant? You traded me and our family for this?" "No," she cried out, reaching for his hands. "I love you. I did something stupid, but it is not love, it is not feelings. It is just experience. I am ready to delete everything. I'll never do it again. Just give me a chance. For us." Robert ripped his hands away and shoved her back. "Experience?" His face twisted in cold disgust. "First you called it a game. Then a coincidence. Now it is an experience? Do you hear yourself?" Claire was weeping openly now, her eyes red and swollen. "I know I am wrong. But please, do not turn this into a tragedy. We can get past this. We can forget it. For love." Robert turned his attention back to Jake, who was sitting on the floor nursing his jaw. He looked down at him with pure disdain. "How many times?" Robert asked. Jake looked away, refusing to meet his eyes. Claire answered for him. 3. We met up 3 times. I did not think you'd ever find out. It meant nothing." Robert closed his eyes for a heartbeat. When he opened them, the anger and the pain had been replaced by a glacial resolve. "You made your choice. Now you can go get all the experience you want. I am done. You make me sick." He leaned down to Jake, grabbing his collar one last time, and hissed, "If I ever see you in my life again, you will regret the day you were born." He shoved Jake aside, turned on his heel, and looked at Claire. "Pack your things. Tonight. And get out." "Robert, no." Her voice cracked. "Please, give me a chance. I'll beg. I'll quit everything, I swear to God." He looked at her, cold and detached. Beg all you want. It will not change a thing. Her hands trembled as she collapsed to her knees, burying her face in her palms. Vanessa sat silently, averting her gaze, while Jake dabbed at his lip. Robert walked out of the room, his footsteps on the stairs sounding like nails being hammered into the coffin of their marriage. The night ended for Robert in silence. He sat in his Tesla, parked a few blocks away, staring through the windshield until his breathing leveled out. He did not scream. He did not smash the steering wheel. He did not curse the world. All of that was gone. In the place of rage, a cold, ruthless calm settled in. There was no room for doubt anymore. The marriage he had invested 8 years in had died the moment he saw Claire in that stranger's bed. He returned to their house in Orange County just as the sun was coming up. The first rays of light hit the stucco walls, but the place did not feel like home anymore. It was a crime scene of memories that were now tainted by lies. Robert walked into the master bedroom, opened the walk-in closet, and started pulling out her clothes. He did not do it with fury. He folded everything methodically, designer dresses, yoga pants, blouses, and packed them into suitcases, one by one, as if he were closing the final chapter of a very long bad book. By noon, 4 large suitcases stood by the front door. He looked at them and realized that it was not just Claire leaving, it was 8 years of his belief system. He pulled out his phone and called a divorce attorney he knew from his corporate network. The conversation was brief. I need to file. Immediately. Adultery. Claire came back in the early evening. She looked wrecked, makeup smeared, eyes bloodshot, but there was a flicker of desperate hope in her expression. She stopped in the foyer, saw the luggage, and went pale. Robert, her voice wavered. You see not. I can, he interrupted, his tone flat. And I did. She took a step forward, but he stopped her with a look. Do not come any closer. Your stuff is here. This is not your house anymore. Please, she whispered. I made a mistake. It did not mean anything. It was just a fling. I do not want to lose you. I'm ready to forget it all. But I do not want to forget, he said. I want to live. She sobbed, dropping to her knees beside the suitcases. I love you, Rob. Only you. That was all just, for the thrill. I do not know what got into me. He looked down at her and felt nothing but cold revulsion. Pity did not even register. You loved the thrill. You loved the games. You loved me when it was convenient for your lifestyle. I'm not an object, Claire. And I'm not a prop for your experiments. She reached for his hand, but he stepped back. It's over. Her lip quivered, tears streaming down her face, but Robert did not flinch. He opened the front door and gestured to the driveway. Take your bags. Call an Uber. She sat there for a few seconds, paralyzed, perhaps hoping he would crack, but his face was stone. Finally, defeat washed over her. She grabbed the handle of the first suitcase, then the second. Her movements were clumsy, her hands shaking, the wheels getting stuck on the rug. Robert did not help. He just watched. When the last bag was outside, he shut the door without waiting for her to leave. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home severed the past. That evening, he sat at the kitchen island, a glass of Japanese whiskey in his hand. His phone buzzed with a notification from the lawyer. Paperwork will be ready within the week. Robert read the message and a faint, grim smile touched his lips. It was not happiness, but it was the satisfaction of cutting out the rot. In the days that followed, he moved with military precision. He leased a new modern condo in Irvine, closer to his office, a sterile, clean slate. He transferred accounts, changed passwords, changed locks. People who knew him as the steady family man were shocked by the speed of his actions, but no one dared to ask too many questions. Robert offered no explanations. He did not owe anyone a justification. Claire called. At first, she begged, then she lashed out, then she wept again. He never picked up. Her voicemails grew more desperate, but they were just noise now. His decision was final. The divorce hearing arrived a month later. In that time, Robert had settled into his new condo in Irvine. He had furnished it with deliberate minimalism, a low-profile Italian leather sofa, a heavy reclaimed wood dining table, 2 Eames chairs, and absolutely nothing on the walls. It was not a temporary bunker, it was the start of a new chapter. He did not put up photos, did not display souvenirs, did not allow for clutter. He wanted a vacuum, a space completely sterilized of his past life. For the first 2 weeks, Claire had tried to besiege him. She sent wall of text messages, called at 2 a.m., and left long rambling voicemails where she oscillated between sobbing apologies and begging for coffee. Then the tone shifted. She went from begging to accusing him of giving up, then back to hysterical tears. Robert never responded. He understood the psychology behind it perfectly. Every word she said was an attempt to regain her safety net, not an expression of genuine remorse. On the day of the hearing, Robert arrived early at the Lamoureux Justice Center. The courtroom was freezing, a sterile box of fluorescent lights and industrial carpet. He sat at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal suit, his face unreadable. He felt zero anxiety. The marriage had effectively died the night he walked out of that house in Coteau de Caza. This, the judge, the lawyers, the decree, was just administrative cleanup, the final door to bolt shut. Claire walked in a few minutes later. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore light makeup, but the concealer could not hide the dark circles under her eyes. She did not look like a woman prepared to fight. She looked like someone banking on a Hail Mary pass. Her attorney leaned in to whisper something to her, and she nodded, but her gaze was locked on Robert like a laser. He did not look back. He did not even acknowledge her presence. To him, she was already a ghost. All rise. The judge entered, robe swishing, and the proceedings began. It started with the standard catechism: date of marriage, separation date, assets, debts. It was dry, devoid of feeling. Robert's lawyer presented the case efficiently. Clare's attorney, a guy who looked like he'd rather be golfing, tried to soften the blow. He spoke about miscommunications and a willingness to attend counseling to preserve the union. "Your Honor," Robert's lawyer interrupted smoothly, "my client has absolutely no interest in reconciliation. The respondent has admitted to infidelity. We are moving for a full dissolution of marriage and a clean division of assets with no spousal support." Clare shot up from her chair. "That is not true." Her voice cracked, echoing off the wood paneling. "Yes, I made a mistake, but it was not cheating in the traditional sense. It was just games. It was a lifestyle thing." Robert turned his head slowly, looking at her for the first time that morning. His eyes were hard as flint. "Games," he said, his voice cutting through the room's quiet. "You incinerated our marriage for games. And today, the game is over." The courtroom went silent. The judge raised a hand to restore order and continued. The rest was procedural. Documents were stamped, signatures verified. Robert answered every question with a calm, clipped tone. Claire tried to interject again, but her words were swallowed by the indifference of the legal machine. Finally, the gavel came down. The court grants the dissolution of the marriage between Robert Mitchell and Clare Mitchell. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. For Clare, it was a death sentence. For Robert, it was the sound of shackles hitting the floor. They walked out of the courtroom separately, but Clare caught up to him near the elevators. "Robert, please, it does not have to end like this. We can start fresh. I'll do anything. I do not want to lose you." He stopped, turning to look at her one last time. There was no anger left, just a vast, empty distance. "You already lost." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the corridor. Outside, the Southern California sun was blinding, the air dry and hot. Robert took a deep breath, filling his lungs. The traffic on the freeway, the palm trees, the concrete, it all looked the same, but the context had shifted. He felt free. It was a cold, solitary kind of freedom, but it was real. Back in his condo in Irvine that evening, he took off his jacket, poured 2 fingers of whiskey, and stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. His phone buzzed on the counter, a confirmation email from his lawyer. Judgment entered. Robert read it, and a faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was not a smile of joy, but of satisfaction. He had cut out the rot. He had made his choice. And this time, it was permanent. And that concludes our story today. Thank you for watching to the end. If you liked it, please give it a like and leave a comment. Also, we are always happy to discuss any comments you may have. See you in the next video.